If you would, please raise your hand if you would support Mitch McConnell for Republican leader in the Senate.
He hasn't asked.
Okay, we noted your duck. We noted your duck. We got that.
Yeah, I don't want to have any doubt about it.
Okay, Congressman Jenkins, you're not raising your hand. You've been a beneficiary of groups tied or aligned with the Senate Majority Leader. Why wouldn't you support him?
You know, Mitch McConnell hasn't even asked for my support. I think it's way too premature. I think, candidly, Mitch McConnell deserves a debt of gratitude for being able to hold a Supreme Court seat open so Neil Gorsuch could be on the Supreme Court today. What I'm interested in doing is getting through the November election, bringing a much-needed Republican vote to the United States Senate, and then we're going to see who's running for Senate. I'm not ruling anybody in. I'm not ruling anybody out. Nobody has asked for my support. What I will do is make a decision on who is going to lead the Senate to support the President Trump agenda.
And so I'm noticing you're not raising your hand either.
No, listen, I'm not the product of the liberal establishment. I think that's why you're seeing all the conservatives come out for me. I'm going to make the right decision after we get through the general election. But I'll tell you this, I wasn't the one recruited by the liberal establishment because of his very questionable record. Once again, Obamacare support, cap and trade support, donating to Joe Manchin, holding a fundraiser at his house. That's not the West Virginia values we need to drain the swamp in Washington.
All right. Well, Mr. Morrissey, let me stay with you for a moment.
Mind if I respond?
Go ahead. You can respond.
Yep, go ahead.
Well, thank you. Unfortunately, Patrick Morrissey continues to spew his lies and misrepresentations. And, you know, they said don't bring out any papers. We had PolitiFact, and all the things that Patrick is saying, supporting Hillary, cap and trade, Planned Parenthood, PolitiFact went through each and every allegation and said false, 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 false. And unfortunately, Patrick thinks if you keep saying it time and time and time again, people will think it's true. Patrick Morrissey, PolitiFact, everybody has debunked everything that you've said. You stood next to me and endorsed me 3 years ago and said I was right for West Virginia. What's different now?
Evan, I didn't know that at the time that you were willing to lie so much and as much of your liberal background. I won't make that mistake again.
All right. Moving right along, Mr. Morrissey, on your website, you tout an endorsement from Steve Bannon. President Trump recently
Do I not
said...
get to speak about McConnell?
You will. You will. Mr. Trump recently said when he was fired, he not only lost his job, he lost his mind. That's a quote from President Trump. The last person that Steve Bannon endorsed was Roy Moore. Is this an association that you're proud of?
Listen, I think it's very clear. I said at the time that it happened, when Bannon went after Trump, I thought it was reprehensible. You don't go after family members and a wife. You just don't do that. Those are not West Virginia values. And what I would argue is that we have a broad array of support throughout the conservative spectrum. Senator Ted Cruz, Senator Rand Paul, we have West Virginians for Life. We have all the principal conservative leaders backing my candidacy because they know there's a huge difference between my record going after Obama's overreach and his record, and this is a fact, rallying for Hillary Clinton and working side by side on the Obama team. It took him 5 years to get off the Barack Obama team. That's opportunism, not principle.
Okay, we're going to get to Mr. Blankenship. Congressman Jenkins, do you want to respond? And who did you vote for in 2008?
I will tell you I did not vote for Hillary Clinton. I am proud to support the Republican. The problem is they went back and looked, fact-checked, looked at every comment I ever made and said Patrick Morrissey is lying. The problem is Patrick Morrissey won't look at the camera, won't look at the people of West Virginia and say why he did not vote for Donald Trump for president in the May primary. He is the one who said publicly Donald Trump wasn't my first choice. Who was your first choice?
Well, let me be clear, and this is a great opportunity. So I'm the only candidate on the stage who not only has voted for Donald Trump at the convention, And in the Electoral College, we said we couldn't bring paper up, but I was one of only 5 people in West Virginia to be part of the Electoral College. People that are trusted to support the president get to be in the Electoral College. But Evan Jenkins, we know in 2007, actually, he rallied for Hillary Clinton. He supported John Kerry for president. It's a very liberal background. And Evan, you said your philosophy was progressive mainstream back in 2003. What changed with you?
We are going to get...
Who did you vote for in the May primary in West Virginia? I endorsed and voted for Donald Trump. Who did you vote for?
I support the president, and that's why just a few weeks ago, just a few weeks ago when I sat next to the president, and Evan was there as well, that we have a great relationship. We've worked together. I was proud to run ads with the president and support him at the convention. Look, there are a lot of people that were not. Evan supported him the day before the primary. That's no profile in courage.
Okay, Mr. Blankenship, to your wish here.
Can I go ahead and comment about something?
You wanted to talk about Mitch McConnell, didn't you?
I do, but I will go ahead and do that. You want to ask a question?
I do want to ask you a question.
They've talked about it enough that I think I can clarify it.
Okay, let me ask you a question. You know, both of these gentlemen mentioned that we had rules, that you couldn't bring paper, you couldn't bring props. You were going to bring props, and we had to kind of take them away from you. And you had these hats that said "Ditch Mitch." You wanted to wear one of these hats, and it was against the rules. So we said no to that. But you have called the Senate Majority Leader a host of different names, including most recently Cocaine Mitch, a reference to an allegation that drugs were found on a ship in 2014 owned by his father-in-law. So here's the question. If you are elected to the U.S. Senate and Mitch McConnell is the Majority Leader, how will you get anything done for West Virginia?
Well, first of all, he won't be the Majority Leader. But let me clarify that both of these guys are right. They're both lying. Anybody that tells you that they're going to go to Washington, D.C. and drain the swamp and don't know whether they're going to vote for Mitch McConnell or not is not telling you the truth, because McConnell has to go to drain the swamp. When he went to D.C. 35 years ago, the national debt was $2 trillion. And now the national debt is $22 trillion. $20 trillion while Mitch McConnell's been there. He has conflicts of interest with China. His family is very powerful in China and very powerful in the United States. One of the things that President Trump is going to face is economic dealings with China, where they now have a $358 billion surplus over us in trade. And he's also going to face issues about human rights and a whole source of other things. Mitch McConnell was one of the few senators that voted after Tiananmen Square not to have punitive actions against China for human rights violations. They killed 500 to 1,000 people at Tiananmen Square. You have to wonder what he's doing. But if you want something else that you should be able to tell you shouldn't vote for McConnell, he interferes with elections all over this country. He's interfering with this election. How are these guys going to stand up when McConnell tells them to sit down, like when Schumer tells Manchin to sit down, when they're going to be beholding to him for having elected him? The reason that Schumer and McConnell have so much power is they control these super PACs. And it's these super PACs that these guys are afraid of, and that's what Joe Manchin probably means when he says that Schumer's too powerful. McConnell's no different. If they tell you that they're going to drain the swamp, but they don't know if they're going to vote for McConnell or not, it can't be true.
Mr. Blankenship, let me just clarify here. Let me just clarify. When you're talking about Mitch McConnell's family, you're talking about the father of the current Secretary of Transportation, President Trump's Secretary of Transportation, Elaine Chao, the father who you called a China person. She is a key decider in infrastructure projects, which might be a big deal in West Virginia. How do you get along and get things done by slinging insults like that?
I'm not going to D.C. to get along, so that won't be a failure, because I don't intend to get along. I intend to make sure that we make a difference. You know, this idea that calling somebody a China person, I mean, I'm an American person. I don't see this insinuation by the press that there's something racist about saying a China person. Some people are Korean persons and some of them are African persons. It's not any slander there. But both families are very powerful in both countries. I've previously been on the board of 4 or 5 major corporations. You do not send family members out to negotiate purchases and deals with other family members. It's called a conflict of interest.
All right. We want to get a quick answer, if we can, from each one of you on this. Right now, there is a bipartisan bill in Congress to prevent the president from being able to fire Robert Mueller, the special counsel, in the investigation. In other words, should the president have the right to fire the special counsel? Mr. Morrissey first.
Well, first of all, the president is the head of the executive branch, and I do think he has a lot of say over who is in his Justice Department. With respect to the Mueller investigation, I think it needs to come to an end. It's a witch hunt.
Do you think the president should fire Robert Mueller?
Look, I think this should come to an end. If it came to an end very quickly, then we wouldn't have to deal with all this endless string of accusations. It's distracting to the president. The president has done a lot of really good things for West Virginia and our country. Deregulating the economy, good Supreme Court justice. He's doing a lot of positive things. I think that's a sideshow, and it should come to an end.
Mr. Jenkins, bipartisan group that got together, they would like to restrict the president on this. What do you say?
I am very clear. End this investigation now. I've seen the documents. I've seen Comey's outrageous leaks. I have seen the witch hunt that has gone after this administration. The Democrats can't give up on the results of 2016. They're fighting this administration each and every day. End this investigation now.
Mr. Blankenship?
Well, you know, I've had a little personal experience with the Department of Justice. They lie a lot, too. So, you know, it's one of those things where when you know what really goes on in the Department of Justice, you wonder where this country's going. It's really crazy. It's a Mueller investigation sitting in, but hopefully it'll be ended before I get there in January, so it should be okay.
To everyone on the stage here, ask a question to everyone. This is on the issue of coal. Senator Manchin is working with the Trump administration, trying to protect the coal industry by invoking a national security law, decades old, much like they've done for the steel and aluminum industries. Do you agree with Senator Manchin on that? Mr. Blankenship.
On the tariffs, is that what you...
This is on trying to protect the coal industry using that same law.
Yeah, I think that protection has to be used very carefully. I do agree with it in this case because I think that, you know, that we've got so many products coming in the U.S., whether it's steel, coal, whatever. We've got products that are being produced with, you know, human rights violations, with people that aren't being paid. And to a great extent, this country has, you know, been a victim of that. All the workers in the United States have been victims of the fact that we're buying stuff from overseas, and those purchases do not pay any taxes for the roads. They do not pay any taxes for Social Security. They do not pay any taxes for your medical care. So when you buy that product, it looks inexpensive, but it's actually very, very expensive because if those products were being made by American workers, they would be paying taxes that would help balance the budget, help provide medical care, help get people off the street, help fix the opioid epidemic. But it's a very dangerous, slippery slope to go down, and it needs to be done analytically, and it needs to be a situation where all 132 countries are looked at in terms of human rights violations, environmental stewardship, and whatever else you want to consider. And then the products need to be looked at individually, and we need to tax the products that we can make cost effectively here and provide American jobs.
Mr. Morrissey, same question on the coal specifically, using the national security law.
Look, I think we need to do everything imaginable to bring coal back. And here's what happened over the last 8 years. Under Barack Obama, he had an absolute assault on coal miners' jobs. And when I got in 2013, I sued the EPA. By 2016, we had that historic Supreme Court win stopping President Obama's top initiative in court. That was a big win. We saved thousands of coal miner jobs. But a lot of damage was done by the Obama administration. They basically tried to force compliance with the utilities, to force utilities to close down, stop burning as much coal. So I do think whether it's looking at issues of national security or my recent proposal, which is going to jury-rig, spit up the amount of met coal production in our country by relieving them of some of the regulatory burdens in place at the EPA, we should do all of the above to make sure that that West Virginia has a chance to recoup, because it was a war on West Virginia.
Well, let me ask you this just quickly. If you did that, how does that match up with your small, conservative values, smaller government? What you're suggesting here, do you think Senator Cruz or Senator Paul would be for doing what you're proposing?
Well, I think that all this is consistent with getting back to a place when Barack Obama says he's going to put a whole industry and coal miners out of business. All we're trying to do is get back to some level playing field to be able to allow coal miners to mine again. So I think it takes ensuring that there will be markets. I'm the most free market-oriented guy here on the stage. But I would say this, when you have damage that's inflicted that's so severe, you have to look at different ways that you can mine and sell coal again.
Congressman Jenkins, same question.
I think you're giving Joe Manchin way too much credit. You're repeating exactly what Joe would like you to think.
You don't
he's
think
fighting
he's working
for
with the Trump
coal.
administration?
The problem is Joe's not a fighter for coal. He says one thing and he does another. Joe Manchin supported Barack Obama. Joe Manchin fought hard to elect Hillary Clinton. He is causing our pain. He might like to think he feels the pain. Joe Manchin has it wrong. I stood there in the White House with President Trump where he signed the piece of legislation I authored, the lead sponsor of, that saved 1/3 of all the coal mining jobs in America. That's making a difference, and we already see the results with less regulations. Jobs are coming back. It's unbelievable. Patrick Morrissey talking about your limited government, he took a pledge in a campaign to eliminate the Department of Energy. We're in Morgantown, West Virginia, hundreds of jobs right here under the Department of Energy to find a future for coal. We don't need to eliminate the Department of Energy. We need to find a coal future. These are important jobs.
We've got to head to break here.
If I can, very briefly, I find it very rich that the person who just voted for the big pork omnibus, $1.3 trillion, has the gall to talk about smaller government. I'm the only proven conservative in this race. We've gone after spending, voluntarily returned a lot of money back to the Treasury here in West Virginia. So a lot of inconsistency, my friend.
Patrick, I eliminated $500 million from the budget of the EPA. I have cut the cost and size of government. You want to do away with the Department of Energy, the DOE jobs here, or creating a future for West Virginia coal miners.
We got to leave it there. We got to take a break. Hold on. Coming up next, we'll be back with the lightning round from West Virginia and Morgantown. Great night. We'll be right back after this break.